AI, as they call it.
We don't program them, we don't make them. We grow them.
Frontier AIs are not built. They are grown.
And so it's very, very different from any kind of regular software engineering.
AI, you don't even have a code base. You have a neural network. There's no code for you to test, and there's no tests.
If you look at what AI models do today, often you won't understand why an AI model does what it does.
It can, write essays and translate and, understand images. It can do all these things that we have no idea how to directly create a computer program to do. And it can do that because we grew it. We didn't write it. We didn't create it.
Large language models were constantly getting surprised by their capabilities. They're not really engineered objects.
Developers don't even know before finishing the training run what their AIs can do.
What we really want to do is understand what's going on inside the model. Maybe we now understand 3% of how they work.
And so then that leaves open this question at the end, which is what the hell is going on inside these systems?
The P in ChatGPT stands for pre-trained. Perhaps we should call it summoning. It's a process where a simple two-page program is soaked in terabytes of data and megawatts of electricity.
And we ask it to predict what comes next in a corpus, right? If you take that forward and you think of more and more data, videos, not just text, videos and things about the physical world, to me, I don't think you can fully dismiss the idea that possibly you start replicating the generative process behind the data, the thing that generated that human
so you
action.
create human cognition.
So there's a group of people, many of them linguists influenced by Chomsky, who call these things stochastic parrots. And they think these things are just a statistical trick that takes a big body of text and just pastiches things together and looks like it understands, but doesn't really understand the way we do. Now, to have that theory that they don't understand the way we do, you have to have a theory of how we understand. I'm going to argue they understand just like we do.
That sounds very sci-fi, I know. But what really predicts what action a human would take next
is
the thinking that the human did in order to create that action.
A discovery that was made in the last few years that the bigger we make these systems, the smarter they are.
Our cousins, the chimpanzees, have very similar brain structures to us, all the same parts. Ours is just 3 times bigger. But even just this small difference of 3 times the brain size is the difference from chimpanzees living in the jungle throwing rocks at each other and human beings building nuclear weapons and going to the moon. So intelligence is something extremely powerful, and it's clearly something that you can get just by making things more somehow.
And so it's not inconceivable to me that you end up with this very good optimizer of objectives, goals, etc. And, its goal isn't like humanity
destroy everything. Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily destroy anything, but it's also not like, yay, humanity.
Indeed, to quote the statement made earlier this year by hundreds of the world's leading AI experts, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI
should be a global priority, alongside other societal scale risks, such as pandemics and nuclear war.
These threats are often referred to as the existential threats of AI, because, of course, they could endanger the very existence of humanity.
And of all the world's problems, tribalism, climate change, etc., you think AI is a bigger problem?
I think climate change is unlikely to kill literally everyone, down to the last man, woman, and child.
Do you think everybody's going to die in my lifetime, in your lifetime?
I would wildly guess my lifetime and even your lifetime.
What's the doomsday scenario here?
It is smarter than humanity. From its perspective, it now wants to get independence of humanity. It doesn't want to be running on computers that require electricity that humans have to generate.
There's movies like Terminator, but it wouldn't quite happen like Terminator because the intelligence would be in the data centers.
Right.
The robot's just the end effector.
Why can't you just put a stop button in? Can you not just take the plug out the wall?
We're not necessarily going to be able to do that because a sufficiently intelligent machine will already have thought of that. But you can't expect to be able to pull the plug unless the machine wants you to pull the plug.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is it's really hard to tell when a model has various problems and various threats. You can say a million things to a model and it can say a million things back. And you might not know that the 1,000,001th was something very dangerous.
What everybody should understand about AI is not a tool. It is an agent. It is the first technology in history that can make decisions by itself, that can create new ideas by itself, and therefore can take power away from us.
You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely the way things are headed, for sure. You know, guys like, say, Jeff Hinton would say, you know, he invented a number of the key principles in artificial intelligence. I think he puts the probability of AI annihilation around 10 to 20%, something like that.
I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I have friends who think we're more likely than not we'll find a way forward because people are very ingenious. But superintelligence is very ingenious too. So because there's other people who think 50-50 will be exaggerating it, I think it's maybe less than 50-50. I think we've got a better than even chance of surviving this. But it's not like there's only a 1% chance of it taking over. It's much bigger than that.
To your question, why build it at all? You know, as you can imagine, that is very, very hotly debated in this community. Now, what happened about a decade ago was this company DeepMind in the UK, in London, said, well, this seems like this will plausibly happen anyway. Let's try to do this in a safe way, right? And then a couple years later, Elon Musk said, after DeepMind was bought out by Google, he said, no, but Google should not be controlling it. That's not safe. So we need to do this in a really safe way. So then he and others founded OpenAI. Okay, and then a few years after that, some fraction of OpenAI said, no, OpenAI is not doing it in a safe enough way. We want to do it in a really, really safe way. And so they broke off from OpenAI and they formed a new company called Anthropic. Right? These are now the three main players in frontier models for generative AI. And they were all founded on this thesis of let's do it ethically before someone can do it unethically. And of course, the fear is that in doing that, you might bring about the very thing that you're worried about.
So these are people who think they can build utopia. They believe that they must build AGI because if they do it, and they're the good guys, then they can use this to usher utopia in for humanity, and this will be great. As long as they're in control of AGI, it's okay. Or like, this is the best plan. It's like, I am firmly, no, I don't think that Anthropic or any other private corporation should be building AGI, period. You know, of course, we should all want a better future. But if your better future is a utopia that's so good that any price is worth paying, that any risk is worth taking, even a 20% chance, which is worse odds than Russian roulette, mind you. Russian roulette is a 16% odd of loss, that everyone dies. I think that's an extremely dangerous ideology. And I think this is not one that most people would agree or subscribe to. So my fundamental belief is the important thing is that we just like keep in mind, things don't go well by default. They go well because someone made them go well. And that someone should be us, and all of us. Like, you know, dear viewer, as someone who has talked to, you know, extremely powerful people, politicians, billionaires, the people in these labs build all these AI systems, national security, intelligence agencies. I've talked to people from all over the world, from different countries, you know, North America, Europe, Asia, everywhere. And what I can tell you is that there are no adults in the room. There is no secret group of super competent, you know, super serious people that have got this shit on lockdown. We do have this, from what I can tell, for example, for nukes, which was a surprise to me. But from what I can tell, there are actually super duper responsible people, at least in the US, as far as I'm aware, that are actually extremely serious about nukes and take this extremely seriously and follow things very carefully and think about things very deeply. This is very nice. And I thank those people for the work that they're doing. I think this is extremely important. But I wanted to be very clear, there are no such people for AI right now.
Look, the reality of what's happening, whether one likes it or not, is that we're building super intelligent AIs, more intelligent than we can comprehend.
Yes.
Controlling, at the end of the day, I don't think we'll be able to control it. So I think the best we can do is make sure it grows up well.
I think the fact that we don't understand how, you know, human brains work, I don't think that alone should give us that much comfort about AI systems, right? There's some like pretty bad humans out there, right? If I look at a 2-year-old child and, I'm like, is this going to be, the next Gandhi or the next Hitler or something in between? We don't really have any, way to predict that, right? I mean, maybe make some guesses, but it's just really hard. So you kind of don't know what you're getting. And I think that's true of AI systems as well. It's like, we know a lot about humans. We know a lot less about AI. So like if I were to make the bear case, it would be, and we already see this when we deploy AI systems, they're alien. They make mistakes that sometimes are hard to understand. They get things right that no human would get right, but sometimes they make mistakes that no humans would make. And I think that's a reason to worry from a safety perspective.
And so it's important to see that intelligence is kind of a separate thing from drives or emotions.
But I don't think it's inherent that as we create superintelligence that it will necessarily always have the same goals in mind that we do. Humans don't always have the same goal as other humans. So who gets control of the technology? How is it built in? I don't think there's a need to panic, but I think the dialogue along those levels, the people who say let's not worry at all, I don't agree with that.
This debate about whether they're going to be good for humanity or bad for humanity, even specialized AI can be very bad for humanity.
Your co-laureate, Geoffrey Hinton, is very vocal in speaking about his fears about machine learning and its potential. Do you share his worries?
Yeah, I share his worries. You always worry when things look very, very powerful and you don't understand why they are, which is to say you don't understand how to control them. If you don't really understand and can explain how they work without saying, if you go deeply enough in the mathematics, they'll work. That's not a satisfactory answer.
We don't have methods to make sure that these systems will not harm people or will not turn against people. We don't know. We don't know how to do that. And we have even arguments that the way we're currently training them would lead to systems that turn against humans.
It's basically a black box. We do not understand the internal principles of operation of those systems. And imagine trying to get a 10 million year guarantee for the safety of a nuclear power plant that nobody designed, that arrived from outer space, that's inside a black box, and we have no idea how it works. It would obviously be impossible to do that.
I worry about anything which says, I'm big, I'm faster than you are, I'm bigger than you are, and I can also run you. Now, can you peacefully inhabit with me? I don't know.
If it became clear to the rest of us that it was out of control and posed a threat to humanity, would there be any way to stop it?
I hope so. I mean, if you have multiple AIs, hopefully you have the AIs that are pro-human be stronger than the AIs that are not.
It might be the case that other AIs are kind of defending the system, or maybe they were never trained for defending. Yeah. With one AI, you can maybe predict what are the possibilities. It would be still, let's say, extremely hard. But once you have many of them competing in some sense for resources, very hard to say actually what might be the consequences.
And for people every day at home, how can we better mitigate some of those concerns with AI? Is it as simple as, turning off your Google Home or unplugging it for a little bit?
No, I don't think there's much that people at home can do. It's the big companies need to do stuff. They need to do more safety research, and governments need to regulate it effectively, have regulations with teeth. I think it's not like recycling or something where they pretend that you can do stuff at home that makes a big difference. I don't think you can here.
Okay, noted.
I think we're at a kind of bifurcation point in history where in the next few years, we need to figure out if there's a way to deal with that threat. So I think it's very important right now for people to be working on the issue of how would we keep control.
What's your concern about existential risk?
Yeah, so I think those risks are real. I think in terms of short, medium, and long-term risks. Short-term risks are the things we're facing today around things like bias and misinformation. Medium-term risks, I think in a couple years as models get better at things like science, engineering, biology,
you can just do bad things with the very bad things with the models that you wouldn't have been able to do without them.
And there's sort of a threshold, right? If the AI can help you make a chemical weapon, but only as much as a Google search could have already helped you, then that's not so concerning, right? But if it can walk you through every step of the process and troubleshoot every single thing that goes wrong, then that's very concerning. Then that might increase by orders of magnitude, the numbers of people with the expertise to do that. And so that's the kind of capability that I think we need to increase our ability to monitor for. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of the safety problem.
The European regulations on AI say none of these regulations apply to military uses of AI. So they clearly intend to go ahead with all that.
The natural development of drone technology in the military context is you need to take the human out of the loop because the human can get jammed. Sure. And so you need to put an AI on the drone.
And there's many other short-term risks like cybercrime, generating bad pathogens, fake videos, surveillance. All of those short-term risks are very serious and we need to take them seriously. And it's going to be very hard to get collaboration on those.
In fact, there isn't a single high-confidence statement that they can make about these systems. Will they copy themselves onto other machines without permission? We haven't the faintest idea. Will they advise terrorists on how to build biological weapons? We don't know. Right? Can you stop them? Oh, no, it's very difficult.
We're going to need to figure out how do you actually deploy some system that under some circumstances will, could help someone construct a biological weapon, but lots of people want to use it for a bunch of other things that are good. So every AI system today is vulnerable to something called jailbreaking, where people can come up with some way to, convince the system to provide advice and assistance on anything they want, no matter what the companies have tried to do so far.
So what they do now is this red team. They go, we hired some smart guys, and and we gave them a week, and they couldn't get the system to to replicate itself or something, and so that's good.
So it's good enough.
Yeah, right.
And then as we go into models that have the key property of agency, which means that they don't just output text, but they can do things, whether it's with a robot or on the internet, then I think we have to worry about them becoming too autonomous and it being hard to stop or control what they do. And I think the extreme end of that is concerns about existential risk.
Is it definitely possible to contain an AGI, though, within the sort of walls of an organisation?
I don't think we know how to do that right now.
Should we be building superintelligent machines at all?
We could just decide not to do it, but the economic incentives are too great. The amount being invested right now specifically to create superintelligent AI is in the ballpark of what the entire world spends on basic science research.
I think if you look at this mad rush for artificial intelligence, they're literally building nuclear reactors to power AI, right?
Well, they're talking about it.
Yeah, okay.
And if we do create superintelligent AI, the value, back of the envelope calculation is tens of quadrillions of pounds.
With these sums of money, the concern is that safety may not be the top priority.
And so, on things like security, OpenAI is reluctant to do things that will, require additional work from researchers or might slow them down to use a more secure system.
When it's decide to deploy GPT-5 or not and decide where the threshold should be, we put extreme care into that and we don't make that decision based off scientific curiosity.
This is because companies just face, an enormous incentive to be, seen as the company that's leading in the AI space.
Some people say that conversations like this are kind of doing OpenAI's marketing work for it. What do you think about that conversation?
I certainly don't feel like what I'm saying here is doing marketing for OpenAI.
Okay.
We need to be able to have a serious and sober conversation about the risks.
And so while on the one hand, it's helpful for tech companies to have responsible AI, trust and safety teams so that they can tell senators that they have them, on the other hand, when it comes to making critical decisions about how the technology gets developed, they're usually left out of the room.
I think it's hard to say where all this can go without sounding like a crazy person. I really believe the technology is going to be that powerful. I hope that in 10 years, all of us, we are limited by what we can imagine.
Do you think it's moving too fast?
My current belief is no, but I could imagine things that would change that quickly, and I would say, okay, this is moving too fast.
Like what? What would change that?
If we made an AI system that was better at doing AI research than all of OpenAI, and you could push a button and just say, improve really fast. That's an example of something I think would be moving too fast.
How concerned is Sam Altman about annihilation, do you think?
I think in reality he's not concerned about it. I don't trust Sam Altman, and I don't think we want to have the most powerful AI in the world controlled by someone who is not trustworthy.
When I sit with you, you're so calm, you're so relatable, it seems like everything's okay. Is that how you really feel?
I don't want to give a false sense of security here.
The bottom line for, I think, most people is whether or not you can trust the people who are in charge. And I know you went through a phase where your own board said, we don't trust you. And then you got yourself another board. How do we know we can trust you?
So the bar on this is clearly extremely high. It is clear that this is going to be a very impactful technology, and I think a lot of scrutiny is thus super warranted.
I actually saw a headline that said you were the most powerful and perhaps most dangerous man on the planet. And I'm wondering how that sits with you.
It's definitely strange to hear you say that.
Do you think there's a chance that XAI, that you are the one that builds AGI?
It's possible.
If you are the one to do it, do you feel the responsibility of that?
Yeah. And I want to be clear, like, let's say if XAI is first, the others won't be far behind. I mean, they might be 6 months behind or a year, maybe, not even that.
When a technology becomes powerful enough, this idea of like 4 or 5 companies that are just kind of like autonomously operating it and doing whatever they want, it just doesn't seem like it's going to lead to a good outcome. And I say that as the person in charge of one of the companies.
And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the geopolitical tensions and sort of race that we can lose sight of sort of this gigantic sort of humanity level decision that we have to make in the sort of not very distant future.
One way that you said that you would want to mitigate the risks was that there would be a moment where you would basically do the scientific version of Avengers Assemble.
Yes, sure.
Is that still your plan?
Yeah, well, I think so.
There may well be no greater test of our leadership than how we deal with AI.
Take this, AI revolution, and I think we're living through a period of massive change, right? This is the biggest technological change since the Industrial Revolution, for sure. For political leaders today to understand that, to work out what the right policy is, to access the opportunities, mitigate the risks, regulate it, leave aside all the geopolitics and the conflicts and war and America, China, all the rest of it. This revolution is going to change everything about our society. And if you don't get across it, then when there is a crisis like the one you're positing could happen, you're going to find you've got no idea how to deal with it.
I sometimes wonder about is whether people who are trying to minimize the chance that there's any AI regulation now, whether they're thinking through the fact that if in fact there's nothing passed and nothing passed and nothing passed and nothing passed, and then something happens with AI, which at some point it will, it's going to be a big powerful technology, something will go wrong at some point. If the only laws that we're getting are being made in a knee-jerk way in reaction to a big crisis, is that going to be productive? Because that is the default path is, nothing, nothing, nothing until there's a giant crisis and then a knee-jerk reaction.
Regulations are really only put into effect after something terrible has happened.
That's correct.
If that's the case for AI, and we're only putting regulations after something terrible has happened, it may be too late to actually put the regulations in place. The AI may be in control at that point.
I think that we really need the public to be involved and say this matters. So, politicians always have to weigh competing interests. They get a lot of money from the tech companies. They're involved with the tech companies in various ways. If the public doesn't speak up, I think we will see very light regulation, if any at all. The reason I wrote this book is I think making these decisions is the most important thing that we can do, or one of the most important things we can do in the world in the next few years. Think about what happened with social media. We waited too long, and we entrenched a set of practices that now lead to all kinds of polarization, bad for teenage girls and so forth. And it's hard to fix these things. We have to get AI policy right now.
As someone who has spent a lot of time in his administration trying to reduce and eliminate regulations, I was surprised by your suggestion to bring regulations before we know exactly what we're dealing with AI.
First order of business would be to gain insight, then put regulations in place to ensure public safety. That's it. And for sure, the companies doing AI will, most of them, not mine, will squawk and say, hey, this is really going to stifle innovation, blah, blah, blah. It's going to move to China. It won't.
We've heard a lot of folks sitting where you're sitting over the last year and a half raise the China point and usually say, well, we mustn't lose the race to China. Therefore, it would be better if Congress did little to nothing. You think that that's wrong. Just explain this to us why.
I think that the competition with China is certainly a very important consideration, and we should be keeping a very close eye on what they're doing and how U.S. technology compares to their technology. But I think it is used as an all-purpose excuse to not regulate and an all-purpose defense against any kind of regulation.
The argument that we are in an existential struggle with China and hence we cannot regulate AI because then China would surge ahead, I think that perspective is completely wrong. First of all, China is regulating AI much more than we are. And the United States is still far ahead of China, except in a few areas such as facial recognition, where there is more greater parity. So there's a lot of room for US to play a regulatory leadership. So that China competition view is not right.
The idea that if America says, well, we're just going to build this superintelligence, which is going to render all existing military technology completely irrelevant. But don't worry, because we're the good guys. And then from that position of strength, we're going to explain to the 1.4 billion Chinese, how the world's going to be structured. But you shouldn't fear this because we're obviously beneficent and the world will just be happier if we do it like this. And that the Chinese are going to nod and go, oh yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable. Okay, well, get back to us in a few years' time and we'll negotiate, or rather, will accept your dictation to us about how the world's now going to be structured. That obviously is never going to happen in a million years. We already know from looking at archives how things like the Cuban Missile Crisis worked out in a lot of detail. Regimes constantly are confused and then are baffled when the archives are opened up and clutch their head and say, my God. It doesn't strike me that the way to go is to start another escalating crisis with China. In fact, I think we should go in the exact opposite way.
The existential threat is a place where people will cooperate. And that's because we're all in the same boat. Nobody wants these AIs to take over from people.
The machines taking over is a threat for everybody. It's a threat for the Chinese and for the Americans and for the Europeans, just like a global nuclear war was.
I think if we can get the international cooperation, I'd love there to be a kind of international CERN, basically, for AI, where you get the top researchers in the world, you go, look, let's focus on the final few years of this AGI project and get it really right and do it scientifically and carefully.
And I think it also totally belies the fact that regulation and innovation do not have to be in tension. This is a technology, AI, that consumers don't trust. There's been recent consumer sentiment surveys showing that if they see AI in a product description, they're less likely to use the product. So if you can implement regulation that is light touch, that increases consumer trust, that helps the government be positioned to understand what is going on with the technology, you can regulate in really sensible ways without even impacting innovation at all.
The pro-AI people in Silicon Valley are doing a pretty bad job on, let's say, convincing people that it's going to be good for them, that it's going to be good for the average person, it's going to be good for our society, and if it all ends up being, and if it all ends up being some version, humans are headed towards the glue factory like a horse. Man, that's sort of probably makes me want to become a Luddite too.